part number M188, flexible plate, from the 1939 mechanised army constructor set. Hi folks, and welcome back. This week's build is intertwined with forestry and also my past. When I left school, I wanted to follow a career path so badly and understood little of what I was witnessing with the people who worked it. I finished formal education some 7 years after the closure of the steelworks. Consett was a ghost town by then. The loss of the works affected nearly every business as well. While the effects of the closure of the works were seen immediately, with nearly 35% of all people in the town unemployed in a stroke of a pen, the truth was nearer to 50% lost their jobs, as one by one other supporting businesses closed as well. My choice of employment was simple. Go on the dreaded government scheme, the loathed YTS, the Youth Training Scheme. Join the forces, something many in my school year did, or leave. I joined the YTS, and through some work managed to get into conservation work. The idea of hedge laying, dry stone walling and forestry work appealed to me. Unfortunately, at the time in northwest Durham there was little to no work, and I lacked the self-confidence to take the advice of people who knew better and leave, to go and work in the areas of Britain where there was some work being done. Oh, I dreamed the dream, travelling from site to site, living in an old bus, no ties, no commitments apart from to myself. And the reality is very different. The work was hard, the hours long, and some of my worst injuries have come from some very dangerous looking tools. But the joy of being able to fell a tree that hits the marker that you've placed in the ground is wonderful. The pleasure of caring for woodland that in some cases was hundreds of years old is awe-inspiring. Working on a dry stone wall and finding a line of old pennies hidden under a through. That's a through stone that goes from one side of the wall to another, and knowing that each penny was placed there when that wall was last worked on, and adding your own penny. The date stamped on the coin tells you when the work was carried out. That connection to workmen long since departed from this world was like discovering a hidden treasure. But instead of taking it, you leave it for the next workman to find. And how many coins have I been near, but never uncovered? But by my time in the late 1980s, horses were rarely used in forestry, and log wagons had disappeared completely from day-to-day use. The purpose of the wagon was to move timber from the work face to either the sawmill, paper mills or railhead. But on the whole the timber's journey was very short. From the woodland to the place where it was worked in the shortest journey possible. If you visit old pit villages that have not been urbanised, you will see pockets of woodland, mostly softwoods or ash, that were grown to provide pit props for the mine, in a method of forestry called coppicing. That's where the word coppice comes from when referring to patches of woodland. It's trees grown and harvested, nurtured over a long time. But the timber needed to be fast growing, easy to work, with a short distance to the sawmill. The same was true of the paper mills in Shotley Bridge. The timber was grown in large plantations that are still there, even though the mills have long gone. Now we use large machines that can hold the tree with one arm and with another cut the tree and feed it into the base, where more chainsaws will remove the branches in a process called snedding. Machines can work in a single day what would have taken a team of workers with chainsaws a week, or a team of crosscut saws a month to work. Technology allows for better productivity, but the trees still grow at the same pace. Nature isn't going to speed up because of our greed for more. Recently, horse teams have been reintroduced into forestry to work historically protected woodlands. I'm talking about broadleaf woodlands that have been managed for nearly 1,000 years, some dating back to Saxon times. Heavy machinery cannot work these tracts of land without destroying it. But draft horses have a knack of knowing where to go, where to place their feet to drag the timber out. The working day slows. The disruption to the wildlife through noise is reduced. The destruction of cutting an access road to have machinery doesn't happen. When I was trained back in the late 1980s, it was by the Forestry Commission. The FC was formed in 1919 after Britain's forests had been decimated by the demands of wood-based products during the First World War. In fact, less than 5% of Britain still had plantations. Again, in the Second World War, the forests of Britain took a hit, and even now that is still showing, as only around 13% of Britain has trees planted in plantations. As most of our plantations are in Scotland, around 70%, it's believed that it will not be until 2060 that Britain will return to pre-industrial revolution levels of timber stock. We have fallen so far behind in planting trees, as most countries in Europe are around 25% as a minimum, to over 70% in the case of Finland. Trees are essential as a filter to scrub carbon from our atmosphere. So they are vital to our policy of net zero. But at over 12,000 square miles of timber in the country as a whole, the industry produces 11.2 million tonnes of timber, less than half of the 25 million tonnes of timber we import every year. Those imports come to around £8.5 billion each year, while we only export around £2 billion. And how do we use that timber? 11.5 million cubic metres of sawn wood, 6.8 million cubic metres of wood-based panels, 9.4 million tonnes of wood-based pellets, and 6.8 million tonnes of paper, and that's per year. Even on top of recycling existing items where possible. Most of that's imported to make wood-based panels and paper, as we're manufacturing around 50% of our domestic needs of sawn timber used in the building trade. But how do we transport this timber? The wagon that I've built today was used to carry timber the very short distance from where it had been cut to where it would be turned into its end product. This allowed for a very low operating cost for transportation. Now we transport our timber predominantly by road, but the rail network is also used, fed by the 13 UK ports that handle our forestry imports and exports. But as anybody who has driven the west coast of Scotland on the Argyll Peninsula will tell you, a timber-laden lorry coming towards you on a tight bend can be a truly terrifying sight, as the timber makes its way towards the processing plants or the port of Troon to begin its outward journey elsewhere in the world. In the last few years, we've seen some trials carried out in both Wales and Scotland to carry the cargo on the railway, as used to happen before the mass transportation revolution of the 1950s. This will help to take 250 lorries off Scottish roads, with a saving of nearly 60,000 miles being driven. And while this will be a twin-edged dagger, because it will include an impact on the road haulage sector in terms of jobs, it will have an impact on the environment and maybe improve the quality of life of people living on or near those roads. And as the UK pushes for lower CO2 emissions, one of the main uses of this timber is wood pellets. Our 9.4 million tonnes that we use each year is used predominantly to power biomass, to produce both power and in some cases heat as well. By 2018, the UK had reduced its reliance on coal by 75%, but has seen biomass increase by an astounding 423%. And this softwood that grows so easily in our Holocene climate that blesses this country allows for tree growth up to twice that of Finland and other countries. So the next time you walk through a woodland, see how many of the 32 species of trees that grow in this country naturally you can find. And ask yourself why this wood is here. Are you walking through ancient woodland that's been supporting this nation for hundreds of years? Or is it post-industrial revolution that helped to make Great Britain a world leader? As part of the government's drive to recreate our National Strategic Reserve of timber, there was a call to plant 30,000 hectares of trees called afforestation per year in areas where trees have not stood for years. These trees, across their lifetime, will help clean our air of pollutants, create oxygen, reduce the effects of flooding, and drive my hay fever crazy.